YouTube comments from a video titled, Why Medieval Bread Was a Superfood While Your Modern Bread Makes You Sick. Part 1.
Chris Wolf K6I wrote,
Farmers DONOT terminate their wheat before harvest with glyphosate. I am a large wheat farmer, and neither our farm or any of our many wheat growing friends across the U.S. would ever do that. First, if all, it's off label and therefore illegal. Secondly, it's not necessary. Wheat matures and dries down sufficiently on its own to combine without the extra time and expense of doing something that could potentially be unhealthy. GET your facts, straight A&D, quit spreading fear.
At World Walker 128 wrote,
Nope. Never felt sick after eating modern bread. Didn't feel bloated, fatigued, brain fogged, etc. But I might just be the rare exception. I've also had classic bread. Didn't like the taste or the texture. Might have been different if we added entirely too much honey to make it into a kind of sweet roll, though.
At Kip 7300 wrote,
Chlorine is only used in sponge flour in places where they can't use chlorine. It can be heat treated to get the same affect. This is how the flour gets its ability to make sponge cake. Benzoyl peroxide ACA. Bleach is used in ultra-white flour. Added gluten is used to raise the protein of the flour, and starch is used to reduce it if the wheat used can't meet the requirement source. It's my job.
At Janice Vindovs wrote,
I never was sick of our local bread. It's brilliant here in Latvia. Your medieval grandfather most probably died from teeth damage from sand in the flour, which came from milling stones.
At N0MT and Amateur Radio wrote,
My family has grown wheat in Colorado for generations. I have not heard of spraying glyphosate on the wheat before harvest. That would add too much cost and be irresponsible.
At the Feist 77 wrote,
Trying to turn my health and that of my family around. Any recommendations on how to get the grains or flour so I can improve our health is appreciated.
Toder wrote,
I'm clickbaiting on the title and not going to even watch this, but surely someone did point out that in medieval times the average life expectancy was less than 40 years, and most people lost their teeth before that.
At Fermin Romero 2602 wrote,
Those traditional grains were stoned ground. Microscopic bits of stone permeated the dough. Chewing the finished bread wore teeth so fast that you had rotten stubs by age 30. Assuming you were lucky enough to live so long. Bread is addictive because the glucose spike causes a dopamine rush. Pleasure. Grains, sadly, are the root of diabetes and metabolic dysfunction. Sadly, it's little more than an emergency source of calories like Coke and sugar disguised as food despite its addictive appeal.
At T3NCH1 wrote,
I've been making my own bread since I was a teen. It helps when you use other grains mixed with unbleached flour, like barley flour, corn flour grits, and beans. If you have a food processor, then it's super easy to make custom flours at home.
At Brusek 2635 wrote,
Americans would never cook their own bead, even if you gave them the ingredients. Too much time and effort. They prefer to text a store and have high-fat, pre-cooked, prepared S-Tough delivered to their home and pay an exorbitant price.
At Luftwaffe_JG52 wrote,
I have never had issues with bread, but my mom developed a form of gluten intolerance that nearly killed her. Thank God she is healthy now, but I'm interested to hear you out on possible reasons.
At Brusek 2635 wrote,
In 1966, I worked at Wonder Bread facility for summer job. My line produced the burger bun. I will always remember the dough ball, the size of a dime, going into some chemical room for a period of time. Next, it was allowed to rise and then through the oven. What is ended up with is a bun 20 times the volume that the tiny ball you started out with.
At Victor Velisic wrote,
Since this video is pure AI, can any experts please answer whether any of this is actually true? I don't feel like wasting my time looking up every single claim made in this video. Thanks.
At the Feist 77 wrote,
Is it possible to get the wheat flour to make my own that is like the heritage? Or do I have to go to the extreme and buy my own berry and grind it myself?
At a Studios 225 wrote,
This is the first time I am seeing the correct info about glyphosate, the substance, and our modern mass-farmed crops. I have been researching this substance and its uses and effects on human health since the days of Kevin T. Rudeau. He wrote a best-selling book on the substance and giving advice on following the natural way to good health. He was then targeted by big agro, big medicine, big pharma, and big money. They demonized him, made false accusations against him, prosecuted him, convicted him, fined him, and jailed him. His books were taken out of bookstores and even off Amazon for a while. I hope they won't go after you in a similar way, because this is a great channel. Everything in this video is correct. However, you left out one thing. The substance is used not only to desiccate or dry out crops post-harvest, but also applied as a weed killer throughout the crop's growing season. The substance has been spliced into several GMO crops' DNA to make it an intrinsic part of the plant's cells, so as to make the crops immune to the weed killer. IOW, if you consume GMO crops, you are also ingesting the substance, which is what causes the gut issues.
At the Feist 77 wrote,
I think my son is having problems with crappy white bread he is in college, so sandwiches are cheap. What can I buy to replace his bread? I have no bakery near me. I am in rural area, just wall crap.
At Moiety VR wrote,
It took me years to figure out I have a sensitivity to malted barley, which is in almost all bread and flour in the US. Even homemade bread using the Costco organic flour caused issues. I knew it wasn't gluten because other wheat products causing no issue. I have already helped one person figure out they had the same issue. I am sure there are others.
At Melb 5996 wrote,
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the fact is that medieval bread was anything but healthy. Unless you were very wealthy, you could find your bread contained some very dangerous stuff including arsenic, chalk sawdust, stone grit from the grinder, acorns, and more.
At Anastunia wrote,
Northern European ethnic groups eat less bread than Mediterranean peoples. I think those of us descended from Ice Age hunters have much more problems with grains, as do cats and dogs.
At Renbreed 9 wrote,
The bread industry has become evil just as the pharmacies and their evil agenda from the pharmaceutical companies have done during the COVID. Why do you think I hate bread and refuse to the sewage crap bread nowadays?
At Just Samosa Mepperson 6396 wrote,
This is why I'm planning to start making my own bread next year when I've built a new kitchen. Bread where I'm from doesn't make me sick. I just need a lot of working a construction job. I've been to Germany a few times. Good bread is standard there. I'm kinda jealous.
At Anastunia wrote,
The study proving that glyphosate did not cause cancer was recently retracted by the publisher because it was shown that Monsanto had secretly ghostwritten most of it. CDR Peter MC Cull of Substack with Nicholas Holschuler, MPH.
At Dizdavies 7896 wrote,
No,
They didn't suffer from metabolic whatever and autoimmune epidemics. They just had actual epidemics like famine and died of starvation. Stop making it seem like being a medieval peasant was such a paradise. It was hell. It was a hard life. Also, where exactly are you supposed to geo to get real bread then? Is there a medieval grocery store right next to the Kroger down the street? No, there is not. Many people do not have the wherewithal and equipment to make their own bread like this. So where do you expect them to go get all the real bread at?
Halvos 12 wrote.
226 I hate it when people use this kind of language, and it makes me extremely distrusting of the video, because people were going around saying it was bad products had cellulose in it, because it's the stuff found in wood pulp. It's also in nearly every single other plant. If a company found that pulping carrots and throwing them into the mix made batter yoga mats that wouldn't make carrots unhealthy, it'd just mean it had more than one use. Could just say, I dunno, azodicarbonamide breaks down into semicarbazide inside the body, which has shown weak carcinogenic activity in laboratory animals. Source Wikipedia.
Don't Die Senpai wrote.
Pick your poison. Sorry, but I'm done. Norman is estimated to have saved over 1 billion lives. People who would have otherwise starved to death. Get rid of GM crops if you want to, but you're going to have to live with the fact that you'd be killing over 1 billion people. We literally cannot feed the world without GM crops. Sure, a single serving may not be as nutritious, but GM crops drastically reduce malnutrition. Just because it's less nutrient dense doesn't mean it's bad.
Norbzarius 5509 wrote.
I have been baking and making bread and pasta for my family for years. Then I discovered sourdough bread almost 10 years ago, and I just recently purchased my own grain mill to mill my own flour. I have different kinds of grains now and would like to work on using just ancient grains. Thank you so much for this informative video. Knowledge is power.
At Action, Andy 88 wrote.
Stopped at minute 2 and typing this comment. There is one thing in the processing of grain that changed everything to better. It was the grinding with steel instead of stone. This saved a lot of teeth in our mouth, and here in Germany, there is even an active law against grinding grain with stone in commercial use. And of course, this stuff the British and American call bread. Sorry guys, this isn't bread. It's something else, this fluffy toast stuff.
Jenny Z901E wrote.
The burger buns at Sonic are intolerable to me, which really bothers me because Sonic is cool. I ask them to use Texas toast because for some reason that's edible.
Phil Spaggett wrote.
You know the biblical saying, man cannot live on bread alone? It was meant to say that you need to fulfill your spiritual needs too, because it's implied that bread was enough to survive on. Modern bread is definitely not enough to live on.
At AOG 1914 wrote.
FLC. Actually, those posh breads are filled with weird fungus, no quality control on flours, and lots of heavy metals from highly questionable fuels and ovens, made with who knows what muds. I've eaten industrial bread for decades, and am the healthiest person I've ever knew, and it's not my opinion. TWO Full Blood Works confirmed IT. All past time was 10x worse.
At Jack Orlando 7 wrote.
Medieval people has eaten only meat and fish, and they were living much longer than today's people. They lie to us so much. Bread is poison. Bread is gluten and leading, which makes people's leaky gut, and it destroy the whole humanity. You eat bread, you will be sick. That's it.
At Deborah Brayman 3238 wrote,
Back when farmers were farmers, not futures traders, food was food, and it was life. Most people spent the majority of their time feeding their families. Farming, gathering, cleaning, processing, preparing a meal, cleaning after the meal. You ground your grain. If you wanted it whiter, you sifted it more. Today we want to take it out of the freezer or fridge, spend a few minutes preparing it, eat it, and put the dishes in the dishwasher. We have more time to make money to buy things we can't enjoy much because we're too busy earning money, but we don't really have time to think about that either. And we pay for it with our health. It's not exactly laziness, we're busier than ever. It is just a shift in priorities that changes literally everything.
as Samuelson wrote,
I always felt modern bread tasted disgusting on its own. Had to be a sandwich or something spread on it. It wasn't until I was an adult and my mom started making natural at-home bread that I began to understand. It was delicious. I just wanted to eat the bread straight with nothing on it. This was when my questioning of modern bread enhanced.
Tamarind Kari wrote,
First of all, it depends on the country. In most European countries, you can find normal bread, and you can still have issues. And why people back then didn't have those issues? They did, they just died faster than we do. So nice propaganda.
At Oscarsenberg 2745 wrote,
There was never a time where grass seeds was better food than our natural foods, fish, meat, fruit, eggs, dairy. Yes, it's even worse nowadays, of course, but it's always shitty famine food. No human in nature ever saw grass seeds and thought it looked good or better than fresh fish or berries, of course.
At Ivan Bayuk wrote,
This wasn't X, it was Y. Bro, write the scripts yourself. That's an AI writing pattern, and it pisses me off it happened X 3 times in this video. That's not natural. Edit, X 4 times. Bro, edit, X 5 times? Just Y edit, X 6 times. Edit, X 7. Edit, X 8. X 9. No way this is normal.
A Space Face Cadet wrote,
This is some Maha BS. Don't fall for it. Bread inflames your gut and makes you sick? Citation needed. There wasn't as much diabetes, celiac, and irritable bowel syndrome in the Middle Ages. Citation needed. It's hard to keep records of diseases that haven't been discovered yet and for which there aren't tests, weirdly. There's more illness now because we don't just all immediately die of it like they did then. There's an epidemic of successful medicine allowing more people to survive and live.
A Dragon du Fogo wrote,
Funny how, if we ate more like this, we would feel satisfied for longer, and we would eat less, which means we wouldn't need to supply so much extra food. But we want it all, and we want it now. Also, companies, growth, and shareholders.
A Gruntzug wrote,
The other day I realized the basked apple croissant at Starbucks was basically a ball of sugar with the mutilated remains of an apple inside. So I've been trying to make my own at home. I will take what I learned from this video into consideration when I try my next batch.
A Honey Sonia wrote,
I used to struggle with bloating. Being so inflamed I bleed, horrid constipation. Ended up, it was modern bread. He cut back to doing it all together. They are no longer bloated, no longer bleed, and feel much healthier. Such a shame that modern bread actually hurts thousands of people, and they don't know it. Complete diet change, but I feel wonderful now. 2 months later, this video is recommended to me, and I feel so validade. Thank you for making this video to help people understand it's not their body, it's the processed junk we're now eating.
At Wolfbert wrote,
Bullshit Daisien to feed the H-ip ok onder Ajax the single evidence they need to explain away their bad habits and mental issues. You can still bake good bread, but you're all baying the shit highest weightest bread you can find instead and eating too much of it. It's your own fault. Victorian-era bread was adulterated with alum, chalk and plaster because it made it whiter and more dense, feeding into the idea of good quality. You people are no different. Go ahead and buy ancient grain flour. It's available. But you'll soon discover you will bake a dry brick without the dangerous gluten lol.
The Three wrote,
I often been thinking how medieval peasants survive on mostly wheat, bread, and water, with meat and fruits being rare. Like today, I can't imagine eating only bread for even 2 meals a day, and they probably did it 3 to 7 days in a row, if not more.
At MJ 5681 wrote,
Best bet is to buy Ezekiel bread or make your own bread from organic whole wheat. My wife makes bread for our family, and it is rare I allow my children to eat any type of highly processed anything.
Asik 31 wrote,
Superfood in terms of how many people it could feed, but health-wise, not so much. This bread is the single responsible for the decline in health and life expectancy of the average human after the Neolithic Revolution, which humanity hasn't recovered until about a century ago. Just because it is better than the cheapest modern bread, it doesn't automatically good.
At Grey Gaming ZA wrote,
I have to admit, every time I eat bread from a handcrafted source, it fills you after 3 to 4 slices. As for store bread, I can eat a whole loaf and still be hungry.
At Dawn 364 wrote,
I remember when YouTube would give you answers to modern problems. Now it's history, significance, analysis, causes, implications, some more history. And finally, go find someone who sells something better. Great. Thanks for wasting my time. Thumbs down.
At MarketShawl 2914 wrote,
In 1997, I bought hash 500 of organic Montana wheat. I grind and bake my own breads and cookies with this wheat. One trick I have learned is that I have to start with half of the wheat I am using and put in all the liquid in the recipe, letting it soak 2 to 3 hours before adding the rest. Turns out great.
And Nicho wrote,
I literally eat rice all day and have no problem. Ate some pretzels and was ugly, inflamed, and genuinely depressed for like a full 2 weeks after, and had onset of completely new IBS symptom. Yeah, forget bread.
At Josoni 122 wrote,
Ich show mir das aus Deutscher und undenk mir, Joa, when man King Richtiges brought nen, dann muss man sich nicht wundern, warum. Is einen krank set match.
Skazni wrote,
Grain was the only food that last more than few days. Same ailments that bother us bother Egyptians. There is not much core difference as it's dominantly starch sugar. Difference was they eat lot less bread overall, at least the pheasants. Saying it's a superfood is same as saying smoking is healthy. Sure, grinding whole grain make huge difference as the enzymes to break down the starch it's still present and proper fermentation also help a lot. There is nothing you can do to not make bread it spike your blood glucose. Not only you eat essentially a heaps of sugar but also fiber that is basically a garbage humans can't digest and just burden the colon. Real superfood is liver and eggs. Dense and full of minerals and vitamin precursors, plus so much needed fat in our diet. For millennia we eat what was available, not what is healthy and proper human diet. If we stop gamifying research and studies, maybe they start giving results based on data and not construct tests to fit the desired outcome.
Epicora 121 wrote,
Can't even go to dessert restaurants these days. You can just taste that they don't use butter anymore, but the other cheaper version of it forgot its name.
At Vicky Tate 7798 wrote,
Did we not change the grains of wheat everywhere in the world, and we caused a bad strain of wheat, and we can never get it back genetically? Question.
At Old Joe 2776 wrote,
The answer to most of society's ills in the modern age is corporate greed. Everything in our diets that is killing us is the result of corporate suits looking for cheaper ingredients for their products in order to maximize profits. The health of the consumers be damned. Then big pharma profits off of treating the illnesses caused chemicals and processes created in a corporate food lab. Food lab doesn't remotely sound appetizing.
At Malakit GJ wrote,
First world problems. Meanwhile, here in my Latin country, while farming and milling is done in industrial levels, much of the baking is done in local bakeries, and our flour have low levels of preservatives due to companies not having the cash to influx the flour with tons of chemicals that aren't need nor bring extra cash to the investment. I mean, we around 0.0 and T09% of our population being celiacs.
At SM Moore BF4E wrote,
So what on earth so wrong with saying the indigenous used ground up seeds, made damper type bread, and cooked in fire no probs? Removed immediately, huh?
At Daniel McNeely 1579 wrote,
I don't disagree with the premise, but maybe its application. How do you do this for a country of 350 million people? People talk about crop yield as if it isn't important, but farmers have bills to pay as well. How much land would we need? How much of the population would have to become farmers again? How many of you would be willing to do that? Yes, a few people can buy artisanal flour and feel good about themselves, but how do we apply it to a whole country? That's the question.
At Error for Life 1 wrote,
Am I the only one that read the title wrong? What I read was why medieval beards were a superfood while your modern beard makes you sick. Maybe I do need to sleep more.
At Corino MF 3J29 wrote,
Interesting, in the United States, the average lifespan is 78 years, and in medieval times, it was 30 to 35 years. My mom is currently 78 years old. My grandma died at about 83, my dad at 76. My Uncle Steve is about 78 and still can ride a 40-mile mountain bike trip. So unfortunately, everyone has to die at some point, but we have all eaten bread of all types and have lived pretty full lives considering.
At Asian American MAGA Prepper wrote,
It's quite sad that most foods are fake these days because they are GMO lab grown and it harms people. We got this Illuminati-ass clown Bill Gates buying up farmlands and building labs to make fake foods and labs to make deadly mosquitoes.
At Gabler 7992 wrote,
I don't know what to tell you, man, but in Poland we have amazing bread. Baked daily, so you can expect fresh bread every morning at the local store, and supermarkets have in-house bakeries most of the time.
At Dr. 904 wrote,
This is only half the story, though. Modern sedentary lifestyles are equally, if not more, to blame for people health issues. People who live very active lives do not suffer nearly as much from eating modern inflammatory bread products. I personally noticed major improvements to my health when I stopped eating wheat products. But I noticed even bigger health improvements when I started gaining muscle from working out.
At Alpha Geminorum 1 wrote,
American here. I hate the bread we get in the US. All of it. But when we visited Iceland for 12 days or a ring road tour, I had the most magnificent bread all across the country and couldn't get enough of it. Something's totally different there about it, and I wish I knew why.
At Caleb_Hammered wrote,
When Marie Antoinette said, "Let them eat cake," the soon-to-be revolutionary Americans took notes. Now we live in the land of decadence where all bread is cake. Suck it, France.
At Hanbill wrote,
12 Fursate, banned in the EU. No, glyphosate is not banned in the EU. In November 2023, based on the assessment provided by EFSA, and assessment group of glyphosate AGG, the European Commission decided to extend glyphosate's authorization for 10 years until 15 December 2033, granted with a few new conditions and restrictions on its use. Source: I couldn't link sources because YouTube is asshole.
At Aficionata Polypernita wrote,
You lost me the moment you tied bread to diabetes. Back in the 14th century, people lived on their feet all day, and that level of activity alone kept blood sugar in check. Today's rise in diabetes isn't because of bread. It's the modern lifestyle as a whole.
At Dark_Brandon_2024 wrote,
Don't know how it is in America? I suppose lots of lifeless white square cut bread. But here in Russia, the standard bread is gray. We call it brick-shaped bread, and we have lots of other brownier and black tasty, slightly bitter breads. And then there is something else that we call something like baguettes. So the white breads. White breads are more like for deserts, and darker ones are for meals.
At Analbegic2780 wrote,
Love the videos inframareos, one small problem, which are the solution, etc. Hope you lack famines and a severe reduction in the world's population after if they are implemented. People here can talk about how they have problems personally, but I don't know how much someone starving will, because modern wheat was reduced.
Julia Varga P. wrote,
Oh my good, my mother and I had to stop eating gluten foods because our body cannot tolerate it. I am so fed up with it, I want to eat bread again.
Terry Tibbs 1040 wrote,
Combine the best of ancient wheat with modern technology. I'm sure they could make bread like in medieval times, but extend the shelf life. Ascorbic acid vitamin C. Extend shelf life, or just keep the bread in the freezer.
At Profeta 0404 wrote,
Nah, man, and that's a USA problem. Where I live, we all eat bread every day. No bread, no breakfast, no bread, no dinner, no bread, no soup. It's just a matter of getting flour, salt, yeast, and water. How hard can it be?
A History with War Room wrote,
That's why I make my own every Sunday afternoon, and I recommend everyone to do the same. Monday and Tuesday, it's still good. By the Wednesday, it's gone, and I wait till Sunday for fresh loaf. Till the Sunday, it's rice, fish, and vegetables. And circle goes on and on.
Kestix 1234 wrote,
They did not have these diseases because the people simply died from those then. Or it was some mystery illness. In Germany, diabetes, for example, is translated into something like sweetly fluid excretion. Pee basically tastes sweet if you have diabetes. There were pee taste doctors who could identify some diseases by the look, smell, and taste of pee. It also heavily depends on where you buy bread. U.S. bread is akin to cake. German bread is almost always bread. I eat it and am satiated for multiple hours. Some are good enough to eat on their own without anything added.
A D12 Min wrote,
I bake bread and bread rolls as well as pizza for a family of 4 2 to 3 times a week, and it takes almost no time and effort if you do it right. Get a medium dark flour for a good balance of texture and healthiness. Prepare dough in the evening for morning bake / in the morning for evening bake. Use just a pea-sized amount of fresh yeast and let the dough sit outside for about 6 to 12 hours. Make a high hydration 70 to 75%. No knead dough. Just fold 2 to 3 times in 30 minutes interval with wet hands. Then cover and let it sit until you get ready for baking. It will be better than grocery store and also better than most bakery bread.
As Zalen Prime wrote,
It's crazy how much information and resource are destroyed and lost because these large corporations are allowed to control markets and own everything and make growing old crops illegal.
A Cosmic Wanderer wrote,
The same way they lied about tobacco and had doctors telling people it was healthy. Even had adverts on the telly saying it was healthy to smoke. It's the same thing they are doing now with food.
Cami3989 wrote,
While homemade bread doesn't last nearly as long as store-bought bread, since it goes stale instead of moldy, there's still plenty of use for it once it's lost its freshness.
A Civid5210 wrote,
Never had problems with bread. I feel like it is more a problem. No wonder when simple food as fast food fries have like 20 ingredients in USA compared to 3 in Europe lol.
At Actipton80 wrote,
The only store-bought bread that doesn't make me sick is sourdough bread from Aldi. I've also bought sourdough sweet rolls from the farmer's market, and they were a lot more filling than your average sweet roll. I can also eat homemade bread that my dad and brother make. They have both been experimenting with fermentation.
Ethue Wardgrape 3838 wrote,
I had some white bread last week. First time in 6 years. It had the same effect that eggs do to me. Horrible fever, pain in the stomach, and makes me extremely tired.
At Sanjabe4159 wrote,
Correct all the way. You said oats as replacement, but even oats. Has same. Issue H processing. It has 80% carbs nowadays. Rice is a killer as polished white rice has huge GI.
At The Outsider VC1 High wrote,
Oh yes, medieval serfs were known for being completely healthy with zero diseases or defects from their diets. Germ theory? Heresy. The terrible way you bend the truth about present day is the problem with videos. Like these nitpicking chemicals out of the context they're in and straight up lying about medieval bread ingredients just to try and make medieval cooking less shit than it was. These types of channels always make me laugh because people tend to forget these superfoods never left. You can still make bread from scratch without this douche blowing smock up your as about how medieval food was somehow better.
At Nathan David Walker 2652 wrote,
Only problem with medieval bread was that the stone fragments introduced during the process of grinding down the grain went into the bread. People's teeth were all kinds of messed up from the bits of rock, which must have caused discomfort and pain.
At Arestle Tree Care wrote,
Almost all modern food is processed. I grew up on a farm in the 1950s. The food grown was brilliant, but by 1970s, industrial agriculture took over. We are lucky and can shop from local farmers and special market. I buy bread, which homemade. I add a bit more. Look up these names and open up a field of useful information. Prof. Tim Spector and his publications Zoe, Team Foo for Life. Chris Van, Tulkekan ultra-processed food. And this, which really started my interest in what I was eating, Julia Ender's gut. This man's work, John Yudkin Pure White, and Dealey was brilliant, but he was jumped on by the corporate industries.
At Pollinagabries 8874 wrote,
Didibim mia wibrak chlebamerikanski chnp. Oni jiri to wybrobim to druggy. Albo god, chlebamerikanski chili to ko w Europai, just zweni klebim tostoim, just obrad liwi. Nachgers just zi ozia ushadnias na tilko chleba amerikanski, I na wasen zucchini truj si tim obrazidlistwan. Crade Europe pamiataja o tradici pichinia dobrego kleba. Niestety unas, tezjakos kleba spada ale nigdi ni ojeni takiego skandalichnigo poziomu jak w stanek. Ludzi po prostu ni kupia takiego gauna.
At wrote,
Medieval people lived hardly to their 30s. They starved most of the year. They've suffered a long list of parasitic, bacterial, and fungal diseases. Malnutrition was the name of the game. Of course, it comes hand in hand with all sort of diseases associated with the chronic malnutrition, DIAB. To onset is typically in the mid-40s. They simply didn't live long enough or had access to plenty of carbs to become diabetic. Don't get me wrong, I'd love the organic, natural, hand-picked, slowly grind grains. But you can hardly sustain 8% of the world population with the old ways and the low-yield natural wild crop, leading us to famine, starvation, resources-driven world war, and the demise of millions if not billions. You can't romantically solve the issue and yearning to the olden days. 8+ billions of mouths need bread to eat or else culling is needed.
At SG 5184 wrote,
Dang, hitting all the conspiracy notes on your Pied Piper flute. Wild take though when they used to whiten bread with alum chalk and plaster of Paris. Maybe the bread wasn't much better and child mortality rates were high and they didn't have calories available on demand or the ability to diagnose any of those things.
Ejbagaz wrote,
The claims that CR owns is CR's all while linked to bread manufacturing because the timelines add up is bullshit. Crohn's is mainly a genetic condition that exploded after the Black Death wiped out people whose immune systems were not as overactive as those with autoimmune diseases. Having Crohn's made you more likely to survive because your body attacks everything it encounters, including its own cells. Not a single professional I've spoken to believes my Crohn's was caused by my diet. And it turned out that my biological father isn't my dad who raised me. 2 half-siblings on my biological father's side of Crohn's, proving it is genetic.
The Crockett 2 Oninner wrote,
I don't recall being fatigued eating bread. I have felt bloated on occasion. That was with store-bought bread in the past. I stayed away from Wonder NON bread and other white breads. Lately, I've been into keto, cutting carbs. Now, I feel much better, but I miss bread. So I got sourdough from a farmer's market for the first time and felt much better anyway. I make it a point to consume carbs after proteins and fats. That, too, seems to go a long way. There is a full row of food I no longer consume at Trader Joe's, mainly because of seed oils and a plethora of ingredients. I stick to real food as much as possible.
A Viking Kong wrote,
Okay, but thousands of years ago, they didn't understand what things like diabetes even were, and average life expectancy was much, much lower than it is today. Yeah, most of our modern bread is unhealthy, but everything was different back then. If someone was unhealthy, they didn't have modern medicine to diagnose the problem. They just died young.
A Groovy Tao wrote,
Just to be clear, This video is valid for the US and other countries with similar problems like UK. Where I live, we have no such problems and the bakeries are really good. Do we also have the shitty toast bread? Yes, but it's also heavily regulated and you can't find that shit in a bakery. I haven't been to US yet, but in UK not only the bread is bad in general, but even the famous sausages. Sadly, I had to refuse the meal, because except the blood pudding and the sauteed mushrooms, the rest was really disgusting, including the sausages. The bacon, the tomatoes were so acidic, and even though they look ripe, they tasted like they never reached that stage. And don't get me started on the beans. Brother, that should be illegal. It should be called sugar with beans, not baked beans. It had so much sugar, I came back home pre-diabetic. Don't know how you can accept sugar with beans, man, and not think that you're disrespected. The waiter was so baffled that I didn't eat even 50% of the English breakfast, and my English friends were always mocking me, until they visited some other countries in Europe, and they changed their mindset. They don't even live in UK anymore.
At Valencerethi wrote,
How exactly do we know people back then didn't have those health issues? They didn't have the same medical documentation we have today that would give us that information if it even was a problem. Stupid video. Stupid intro. Run-on sentence ahead. The intellectual assumptions carried by the English accent stereotype has been abused so hard and long. I now associate it with utterly false and moronic information meant to be convincing only to thoughtless ingrates.
Ethoth Hartmut 2833 wrote,
I have a funny feeling this video is going to translate to only bougie people being able to afford real bread that doesn't make you sick because it's too expensive for the common person to afford. The exact opposite of the original intent of bread making. Hooray, it's 2025. Now life-giving bread is a premium product rather than something that sustains nations. Only 99 poenteen, 99 at your local bread smithery in your local luxury shopping district, where all your necessities are overpriced luxuries.
At Orient 81 wrote,
I stopped eating bread years ago. My mother used to cook real bread years ago. It had maybe 4 ingredients. Bread that's sold these days is more like cake, filled with potions.
At Ant Pictures wrote,
The beginning of this video has so many factual mistakes is incredible. ¿Diabetes in middle age? No, disparado por más bienvenido al zar Kapanyev. Nobody even knew it exist. Entonces se varió el existe. Había sopado por estar detrás. As cuales 99 personas diseases de today's modern medicine studied. How can you expect tanto no de have non-naive there? Mas Pepel no 20.000. Nos retiró. Mas Pepel es mis enemigo. Que por la más interesa la voz que tenéis moral distinto que mi padre nos comenzaba a alabarse de ello. And you claim people back then were healthy because they ate some special kind of bread?
At Suzanne Swift 2319 wrote,
Lots of misinformation here. Wheat INNOT engineered. Period. Like many things such as carrots, apples, lettuce, etc. It has been carefully bred over hundreds of years. Guys, everything is different. It's not engineered. It's just been selectively bred for different reasons, from disease resistance to drought resistance to size. Also, the guy is literally describing sourdough. Sourdough is still made and even more popular now. The internet and fear-mongering will be the death of society.
Aeschylus C. wrote,
For a channel claiming medieval knowledge, the notion that all common folk worked 12-plus hour shifts all day, every day, is rather uninformed. There were absolutely periods where they did. Harvest season at sea, but it's not like they spent all seasons in a factory running 12-hour-plus work shift for a capitalist or feudal overlord. They worked when it was needed and lived off the proceeds when work wasn't needed.
At Nikonian wrote,
Is that ear? I stopped when you had said that medieval people got no disease from bread. How can you know for sure? Answer, it's impossible. There was no record nor detection.
Picklerick P4J wrote,
Elmfo, there's so much stone dust in that your teeth will be flat to the gums in 10 years. Just go chew on drywall. You won't have to work so hard to ruin your body. Super fucked up food maybe.
At Rushgush wrote,
My stepdad smokes cigarettes since he was 9, eats like trash, has diabetes, and he's 78. Meanwhile, you have young athletes who don't smoke, eat right, and still die young. It's ironic.
At John Pienta 4200 wrote,
This is a lot of magical thinking and heavily reliant on the naturalistic fallacy. We have ancestral grains available today. You can still get stone ground flour made from these and make sourdough from that. You absolutely can still get celiac disease from that. There's some historical accounts from Northern Europe of children dying from celiac disease. They slowly starved to death, and they didn't live hardy, strong lives building cathedrals because they were dead. Medieval bread was not magical, and it's really not that different. It is still ultra-processed by most definitions. If you want to start throwing around ancient is better arguments, check out the fact that as we hunted megafauna starting about 4 Maya, our brain volume quadrupled from our ancient ancestors. Since the dawn of civilization, we have actually seen human brain volume decrease by a significant amount, not since chemicals and industrial process were added to food.